So this can we reduce the noise? Yeah, good afternoon once again. Yeah, without wasting time, we'll be going into the business of the literature in English. And for this particular session, we're going to be going through a lot of potential areas where questions might be asked in the examination. So to commence this particular session, we'll be going through some of the literary aspects of this particular subject. To begin with, we'll take a look at various terminologies that are related to the three genres of literature. And when we are done with that, we'll take a look at various literary devices, the figures of speech, and a whole lot of things. So without wasting time, let's quickly go into the first thing for this particular session. Okay. Yeah, just as we all know, there are three genres of literature, and it's very fundamental that we familiarize ourselves with the various terminologies that we can find under these three genres of literature, as questions can be asked from any of the three genres, and we need to be very familiar with these terminologies. Just as we all know, the examination is purely 70 to 80% literary devices. So your knowledge, your understanding of literary devices will actually go a long way in boosting your chances in this examination, because as we also know, most of the questions that are related to the poetry, that is the recommended poems, to be able to attend them, you need to have a solid understanding of literary devices as well. Literary devices, the poetic devices, the likes of tone, the likes of mood, the likes of imagery, and figures of speech generally. So the literary aspect of literature is a very fundamental part of the subject itself. And we're going to be introducing ourselves, or reminding ourselves, as the case may be, of some of these terminologies. Now, when you talk about drama, of course, there are words that once you see them, you realize that we are dealing with the dramatic genre of literature. Yes, there are words that are peculiar to drama, and this afternoon we'll be dealing with some of them. Yeah, the first thing you need to know this afternoon is the three different forms of a play. The three different forms of a play. A play can take any of the following forms. A play can be in form of a comedy. A play can be in form of a tragedy, and it can also be in form of what? A tragic comedy. So we have the comic aspects of a play. So one after the other, we'll be explaining each of the three. Now, when you talk about comedy, the first thing that comes to mind is laughter. The first thing that comes to mind is fun. The first thing that comes to mind is entertainment. Yes. Now, why these three are very important in a comedy? For the purpose of using ME, comedy is not strictly about laughter, it's not strictly about fun, it's not strictly about happiness, it's not strictly about entertainment. So, if a question is asked in this manner, one of the following best describes the term comedy. One of the following best describes the term comedy, and you have the following options. You have option A play that is full of laughter from beginning to the end. B, a play in which no single death is recorded. C, a play in which the audience are sufficiently entertained. And then option D, a play in which there's a happy resolution of all contradictions. What would be a potential answer to this question exactly? A very good answer to this question is option D. Yes. And in essence, what are we saying? A comedy is majorly about one concept, that is happy resolution. Happy resolution. You need to be able to distinguish between a comedy as a type of play as well as a comedy skit. There's a difference between comedy as a form of play and the comedy skits you watch online. The likes of Talma, the likes of, you know them, of course. So those ones are comedy skits. But when you talk about comedy as a form of play, then the essential thing that comes to mind is happy resolution. So, in summary, a comedy is a type of play that comes with light tension. That is, the tension in a comedy is light. When I say light, I mean reduced, mild, not so noticeable, not so terrible, just something that is controllable. So you can say a comedy is a play that comes with light and minimal tension. And above all, there is a happy resolution at the end of it all. So a comedy comes with light tension. That is, the tension there is not so terrible. The tension there is not as terrible as what we have under a tragedy or perhaps the tragic comedy. So the tension in a comedy is minimal. It is under control. And the main character in a comedy is usually called what? The comic hero. So in a comedy, the main character is a comic hero. So please have it at the back of your mind that comedy is not all about laughter, entertainment, and fun. So of course, you can't read a comic book or watch a comic play without laughing. There will be some funny scenes. There will be some events that will trigger laughter. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of the comedy is not just to trigger laughter. Rather, the intention is presented in a very mild manner. And at the end of it all, every complication that must have arisen in the course of the work is usually amicably resolved. Let me give you an example. Permit me to give you an example. Now, take for example, you have Mr. A and Miss B. Mr. A is desirous of getting married to Miss B. Mr. A happens to be from a very poor background, while Miss B is from a wealthy background. And as expected, the parents of the lady were actually against their daughter getting married to the poor guy. And in the process, there was a kind of tension. And it ended up, they ended up running away from home just to actualize their marital desire. But at the end of the day, there was an amicable resolution in the sense that the parents came to their senses and they allowed the marriage to take place. And everything ended on a very happy note. What you observe about this kind of storyline is that the play actually has a little bit of a tension. So the tension there is reduced, the tension there is minimal. But at the end of the day, everything was amicably settled. So that is the perfect definition of a comedy. A comedy can take various forms. A comedy can take various forms. One of the forms of comedy that we need to know for the purpose of the exam is yes, the first thing we need to know is the word farce. I know this is a word we are all familiar with. The word farce. So farce is a comic play. How does farce take place? So the basic thing you need to know about farce is that farce is a kind of exaggerated comic play. So farce comes with what? Serious exaggeration. The goal of a farce is not didacticism. Now, what do you mean by didacticism? That is the art of instructing, the art of teaching moral lessons, the art of passing across vital lessons through a literary work. So what are we saying in essence? A farce does not have a goal of being didactic. Don't forget if you are asked in the exam that a play that instructs or a literary work that instructs is said to be dash. The play is what? Is said to be what? Didactic. And you need to know the spelling of didactic because the examiners can try to cause one or two confusion. So this is the correct spelling of didactic. You can see something like this. This one is totally wrong. So this is the correct spelling of didactic. So didactic, not didactic. So a literary work that is didactic is one that teaches moral lessons. So what I would say in essence about a farce is that a farce does not have any intention to teach any moral lesson. Are we together? The major objective of a farce is to entertain. Yes. So a farce uses exaggerated absurdities. Exaggerated absurdities to entertain rather than to teach moral lessons. So the question can be asked in any way. If you are asked in this manner, a literary work or a comic play that thrives on exaggerated absurdities is called dash. The answer is farce. A play in which didacticism is sacrificed on the altar of entertainment is called what? Is still a farce. A play in which moral lessons are being neglected while entertainment is presented is still farce. So the question can be asked in any way. But the essential thing to note is that it is full of ridiculous events. It is full of ridiculous events. Events that are totally unrealistic. A very good example of a farce is the film flicks that we normally watch in many of our Hollywood, our Bollywood, all kind of movies that comes with a film flick. So when you watch a film flick, take for example, you are watching a movie and you realize that somebody got knocked down by a car, and immediately the person stood up, dusted himself off, and continued walking. You realize that the producer of such play has no intention to educate you or to be didactic. The intention is for you to watch, laugh, have fun, and forget about it. No significant lesson can really be learned from a farce. A farce is only out there to entertain and to make you laugh, and that's about a farce. Another form of comedy that we need to know, another form of comic play is what we call a satiric comedy. We have a satiric comedy, which we can also call a satire. And one way or the other, you must have thought maybe of a satire. So a satire actually performs certain functions in a literary work. There are three things you need to know about a satire. The first thing to know about a satire is exposition or presentation or identification of societal failures, ills, shortcomings, abnormalities. That is the first function of a satire. A satire exposes societal ills, shortcomings, and abnormalities. Now, when you say something is a societal ill, what does that mean? It means something that is not going on properly in the society. Now, take for example, these are Yahoo between the drug abuse, child trafficking, human trafficking, female genital mutilation, gender-based violence, all these kind of things. They are abnormalities in the society. So when a literary work presents these abnormalities in a way that will provoke change, then a satire is said to have been utilized. So that's what I was saying earlier. The functions of a satire. Number one, a satire helps to identify societal ills and shortcomings. And then secondly, a satire will actually mock or ridicule these societal ills. I repeat, after identifying and presenting a societal ill, The satire or the satiric work will ridicule or mock these particular ills. And then finally, a satire provokes change. A satire provokes change. Or you can say a satire aims to correct those societal ills. Are we together? Now, let me give us an example. You are reading a literary work, or you are watching a literary, you are watching a movie in which the subject matter of that literary work is, let's say, ritual killing. Yes, the author or the producer has the intention of criticizing or castigating ritual killing in the society. And a lot of comic scenes were included that will make the reader or the viewers laugh and get entertained. But in the midst of getting entertained, you are also learning vital lessons. So when this is the case, satire is said to have been utilized. Satire is said to have been utilized. So that is that about that. So a satire is a literary terminology that is used in literature in a comic work and which arises in situations whereby a societal abnormality is pointed out and ridiculed, and then ultimately it is corrected or modified or amended. So that is just about a satiric work. Another form of comedy is what we call dark comedy, also known as what? The dark humor. Now, when you call a literary work a dark humor, it happens in situations whereby serious issues, serious societal issues are being presented in trivial manners. What do I mean? Dark comedy or dark humor arises when serious issues in the society that need urgent attention are being presented in a way that shows irrelevance. That is, you are aware of the fact that this event should have been presented or treated in a more serious manner. But the way it is being presented does not even draw anyone's attention. It doesn't draw anyone's seriousness. It doesn't draw anyone's sympathy. It is just presented in a lackadaisical manner, as if it doesn't matter at all. So when this is the case in a literary work, then such literary work may be called a dark humor or a dark comedy. We also have what we call a melodrama. We have what we call a melodrama. We have what we call a melodrama. Now, what does it mean when a literary work is said to be melodramatic? When a literary work is melodramatic, what does that mean? Exaggerated sensations. Fantastic. So, exaggerated sensational reactions to events on stage. So, melodrama arises when the characters on stage tend to exaggerate their emotional reactions to certain events taking place on the stage. Let me take this again. A melodrama arises when characters on stage tend to exaggerate or overplay or overhype their emotional reactions to certain events taking place on the stage. So when a literary work arises in which the characters are exaggerating their reactions, you realize that the reactions being given to events actually appear to be what? Out of place. Then such a literary work is said to be melodramatic in nature. We are still discussing the various forms of a comedy. We are still discussing the various forms, the various ways by which a comic work may arise. The next thing I want us to know about the comedy is what we call the caricature. This These two terminologies are almost similar, and we're going to be comparing and contrasting them. What is the difference between a caricature and a lampoon? The fact is that both of them have the same targets, they have the same aim, they have the same objective, but they come in different manners. Now, a caricature usually comes in a diagrammatic form. A caricature comes in a pictorial form. So, in essence, if you're writing, you can say a caricature is a diagrammatic or graphical representation. A caricature is a diagrammatic or graphical representation. Yes, it is a diagrammatic or graphical representation directed as a public figure, directed as a public figure or institution. A caricature is a diagrammatic representation, a graphical representation directed as a public figure or institution for the singular purpose of mocking such public figure or institution. What are we saying in essence? The primary objective of a caricature is to ridicule or to mock in a diagrammatic form. And we have them in various newspapers. You can see them in various newspapers, especially under the cartoon segments. Sometimes the editors or the editors can actually prepare a diagram that is meant to represent a notable character, a notable figure, either in politics, either in the economic sector, or in any sector. And the primary purpose of presenting such diagram is not for any other thing other than to mock or to ridicule this particular figure. That is a caricature. However, what distinguishes a caricature from a lampoon? What distinguishes a caricature from a lampoon? Yes, in case you are writing, you can say a lampoon is a written and dramatic attack. A lampoon is a written and dramatic attack. A lampoon is a written and dramatic attack aimed at ridiculing or mocking public figures. Aimed at ridiculing or mocking public figures. So that is just the key difference between a caricature and a lampoon. So a caricature comes in a diagrammatic form, in a cartoon form, in a graphical form, in a pictorial form. While on the other hand, we have a lampoon coming in a written or dramatic form. So any question in the exam that says a written attack meant to bring a public figure or a public institution to reproach is called dash. You don't need any prophets to tell you that the answer was a lampoon. And that is that about that. But when the question contains any element of diagram, graphics, picture, or anything that's to do with drawing or illustration, then that would be what? A caricature. I hope that is clear. I hope that is clear. Okay. So now, how about if you are asked this particular question that says, a deliberate mimicry? Yes. Okay. Yes, you can call it travesty. Yes, you can call it travesty. Yeah, so that is that. If you are asked this question in the exam, there's a deliberate or an intentional mimicry of an author with the intention to mock or ridicule is called dash. What will you pick? Parody. Correct. And that makes parody one of the forms of comedy as well. That makes parody one of the forms of comedy. Alternatively, after reading the question, you realize that you can find parody in any of the given options. What else can be a potential answer to that question? You have ballets. Thank you very much. So you have a bullet. So a bullet and a parody are essentially synonymous. So we have many other forms of comedy, but these are the basic ones that we need to familiarize ourselves with. How do you get that? Any questions so far? Any question at this juncture? How free to move ahead? Okay. So now let's delve into the world of tragedy as a form of play. Let's take a look at what tragedy implies as a type of play. You have the question, okay? A poem. Don't worry, when we get to poetry, just keep the question for us. When we get to poetry, we address that. So let's not digress. So tragedy as a type of play. Of course, tragedy is a play that comes with serious tension. Tragedy is a play that comes with serious tension and ends on a sorrowful note. So tragedy is a play that comes with serious tension and ends on a sorrowful note. A perfect example of a tragic work is our recommended one of our recommended books. That's the African drama titled "Let Me Die Alone" by John Cabo. The book is a perfect example of a tragedy. So a tragic work comes with so much tension, so much apprehension, and eventually ends on a very sorrowful and tragic note. The main character in a tragic work is usually called a tragic hero. Don't forget we said the other time that the main character in a play with happy resolution is called a comic hero. But for a tragedy, the main character is called a tragic hero. If you are asked in the exam that which of the types of plays is most likely to require the use of a comic relief, what will your answer be? It's likely tragedy. Tragedy is the most likely form of play to require a comic relief. Why? Because the tension is usually so much, and there's a need to create a short scene to enliven the audience or to enliven the readers. Now, let's take a look at this John Colosacago's book. What part of the play can be described as a comic relief? What part of that play can be described as a comic relief? Yes, when Undapi caught his wife, Jilu, having extramarital affairs with who? With Lansana. It was a kind of comic relief because right from the beginning of the play, right from the beginning of the play, there has been a build-up of tension. There has been serious tension right from the beginning of the play. We saw how Lamboy and Musa craftily hatched the plot to kill the chief, Banya. And even after eliminating Banya, they still went ahead to frustrate Madame Yoko. They tried everything within their powers to ensure that Madame Yoko does not become the fourth female chief of the Mende people. But eventually, she prevailed. And even after she prevailed, she was still not feeling comfortable. The tension was still palpable. The tension was still obvious. At a point, she had to move the kingdom from Senegal to Muyamba. She had to move the kingdom from Senegal to Muyamba. But the tension still continued because Lamboy and Musa never rested in their ungodly attempts, in their devilish attempts to bring down Madame Yoko. So that part where Lansana and Jilu were caught served as a kind of entertaining scene. We were able to laugh and relieve ourselves of some of the tension that's already accumulated in our hearts. So, in essence, comic relief is mostly found in a tragic work. We can also find it in a tragic comedy. We can find it in a tragic comedy. One house, please. We can find it in a tragic comedy. But most likely, it happens more in a tragedy. So that is that about that. Now, if you are asked in the exam that according to the Aristotelian precepts, what are the essential elements of a tragedy? According to the Aristotelian precepts, what are the essential elements of a tragedy? Yes, there must be a tragic hero. Precepts. So, a question might be asked from this angle. You may be asked that all but one of the following are not part of the Aristotelian precepts. That is, according to Aristotle, a classical tragedy must reflect all except one of the following. And they said A, presence of hubris. B, a noble character as a tragic hero. C, presence of a tragic hero. D, unexpected peripetia. The answer will be what? D. Because the first three are all precepts. They are all Aristotelian precepts. And apart from that, if you are also asked that a literary work or a tragic work that presents or that reflects all the Aristotelian precepts of a tragedy is called that. The answer is what? A classical tragedy. Yes, a kind of tragedy that imbibes all the Aristotelian precepts of a tragedy is called a classical tragedy. So that is that about that. So tragedy can also take various forms. Let's quickly discuss a few of them. We've talked about classical tragedy indirectly now in our explanation. We also have what we call the domestic tragedy. The domestic tragedy. When you say a tragedy is domestic, it talks about what? Tragic events that arose out of normal day-to-day family life. Normal day-to-day family affairs. Normal day-to-day family life. So a literary work that encompasses the day-to-day family life That is, the tragic work is presented from the perspective of day-to-day family life. Then such work is said to be a domestic tragedy. We also have a romantic tragedy. A romantic tragedy. So this is a kind of tragedy. This is a kind of tragedy that arises out of the love affairs, the love relationship between two parties, a boy and a girl, a guy and a lady. I know a few of us must have read the popular Romeo and Juliet. Yes, I know a good number of us must have read Romeo and Juliet. Or one way or the other, you must have had a thing or two about this particular book. Yes. So now, when a tragedy is centered around relationship between two parties and it ultimately ends on a sorrowful note, you don't need any prophet to tell you that such work is a tragic work, specifically a romantic tragedy. So that is that about that. So please take note of the fact that the most important thing about a tragedy is the sorrowful end. The most important thing about a tragedy is the sorrowful end. That a literary work is tragic does not mean you won't have comic scenes in between. I repeat, that a literary work is tragic does not mean you won't have comic scenes in between. Just like the way we said it the other time. That the fact that a literary work is a comedy does not mean everything will be full of happiness from beginning to the end. There will be minimal tension at a point. But what matters there is what happy resolution. In the same vein, what matters in a tragic work is the sorrowful end. Just as you can see the Kolosakabo's book, let me that alone. There were happy scenes in between, but the happy scenes were more dominated by the tragic scenes. And at the end of the day, the play ended sorrowfully. In the sense that Madame Yoko had to swallow poison. She swallowed poison just because she could no longer bear the disrespect and the disregard given to her by the resident officer. The resident officer in Sierra Leone back then. So her territory was reduced, and before you know it, she felt humiliated. And coupled with the fact that she was unjustly accused of killing Geneva, she found it so unbearable. She took her own life. So that is that about that. Now, the next part of our discussion this afternoon will take us to what we call tragic comedy. A tragic comedy. Because when you talk about tragic comedy, the first thing that comes to mind is a play that combines the elements of a comedy and a tragedy. Yes, that is the normal definition. But you can take it to another step. You can take it a step higher by saying a tragedy a tragic comedy is a literary work that commences with some forms of tension. A tragic comedy is a literary work that commences with some forms of tension and appears destined to end sorrowfully. Let me take it again. A tragic comedy is a work that commences with some forms of tension and appears destined to end sorrowfully. And appears destined to end sorrowfully. And appears destined to end sorrowfully. But with the timely intervention of the Deus Ex Machina, this is a spelling. But with the timely intervention of the Deus Ex Machina, what is the meaning of Deus Ex Machina? Yeah, I want the direct interpretation. It means God God from the machine. Deus ex machina means God from the machine. The God is the small letter G. So Deus ex machina. Yeah, it's written as machina, but pronounced as machina. So Deus ex machina talks about a sudden. Okay, let me complete the definition I was giving earlier. Yeah, but for the timely intervention of the Deus ex machina, a play that has been anticipated to end sorrowfully. A play that has been anticipated to end sorrowfully eventually ends happily. A play that has been anticipated to end sorrowfully eventually ends happily. Full stop. So that is that. Now, let me give us a detailed explanation. Yes, a tragic comedy involves a blend of comic work, comic events, comic scenes, as well as tragic scenes. So what does that mean? It means most times a tragic comedy commences with a kind of tension. The tension in a tragic comedy at the beginning is usually very clear. And a normal human being reading a tragic comedy or watching a tragic comedy might have already anticipated that this play will end sorrowfully. But towards the end of the play, that is, at the last minute, or almost at the last minute, there is a sudden intervention, a supernatural and unexpected, a surprising event that changes the order of everything and makes an anticipated sorrowful play to end happily. What we are saying in essence is this. You are watching a film, for example, you are watching a movie. From the beginning, the main character has been passing through a series of challenges. There have been series of challenges in that literary work. And you already have it at the back of your mind that this play is going to be a tragic work. But all of a sudden, something happens at the last moment and it changes everything. Everything ends happily. That play is now called a tragic comedy. Take for instance, you are watching a movie. You are watching a movie. And in that particular movie, the main character happens to be suffering from a seemingly incurable disease. Having put every mechanism in place to ensure that the disease is cured, but all to no avail. We viewers are left anticipating his death, that he will die, and the play will end sorrowfully. But at the last minute, the boy, the main character, let's assume the main character wants to be a boy, found himself on a farmland and he was terribly hungry. He saw a strange looking fruit. He doesn't know the nature of that fruit. He plucked that fruit and he ate the fruit. And all of a sudden, he felt a kind of relief in his body. And before you know it, he began to get better over the next few days. He went to the hospital to conduct a test. And in that test, someone that was confirmed positive for that particular disease tested negative. He confirmed it in 3 different hospitals, the same results. Now, let's assume that in the course of the play, he lost out of the opportunity to marry his fiancée because of that disease. So at the end of the play, there is a sudden cure that has taken place. And then he was able to get married to his fiancée and they lived a happy and meaningful life thereafter. What has taken place? Deus ex machina has come in to rescue the play from a sorrowful end. So Deus ex machina is a supernatural, a sudden, and unexpected event that suddenly occurs to change the expected end of a literary work. To change the expected end of a literary work. A literary work that has been anticipated, that has been envisaged to end sorrowfully, eventually ends happily. All thanks to the influence of the Deus Ex Machina. The Deus Ex Machina is not a person. It's not a personality. It's not an individual. It can be an event. It can be an object. It can be an occurrence, but not necessarily just a person. So that is that about tragic comedy. So, summarily speaking, a play that ends on a happy note might not necessarily be a tragic comedy. The difference between a comedy and a tragic comedy now is that a comedy comes with light tension, but it is very easy to envisage or predict that a comedy will end happily. But for tragic comedy, you are already viewing it from the perspective of a tragedy. But at the last minute, everything changes. Everything changes and it ultimately ends happily. So that is that about that. Any questions so far on what we have discussed? Any question before we continue? Can we continue? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so up next now, we'll be taking a look at various dramatic terminologies. That is, terminologies that are peculiar to a play. Now, one thing you need to know is that some terminologies are, should I say, multi-purpose, or they serve, let's say, they serve a dual purpose. That is, there are some terminologies that are peculiar to drama and prose. There are some terminologies that are peculiar to all three genres of literature. You need to bear in mind that some terminologies cut across all the three genres of literature. Now, who can give us an example of a terminology that cuts across all the three genres of literature? Who can give us a literary term that applies to all three genres, drama, prose, and poetry? Yes? How about symbolism? Do we have symbolism in drama? Yes. Do we have it in prose? Yes. Do we have it in poetry? Yes. Let's take a look at dialogue. Do we have dialogue in drama? Of course. Do we have dialogue in prose? Of course. Because the characters must surely exchange conversations. Do we have dialogue in poetry? We may have dialogue in some poems, especially dramatic poems. Some poems are called dramatic poems. You can have dialogue there. So, but before we go to that, let's quickly deal with some dramatic terminologies. I want us to know the differences between these words. Okay. A. Okay. Now, how many of us have said these words for the first time? These two words on the board. How many of us have said the two words for the very first time? So that means we have a perfect understanding of these two words. Who is willing to try? Yes, who is willing to try? Yes, you are raising your hand. Please tell us something. How can you distinguish between the two terminologies? Okay, correct. That's fantastic. Yeah, so in essence, the first terminology, anagnorisis. You can take it down in different ways because the questions can be asked in different ways. So, for the first definition, you can say anagnorisis is the point in a play. Anagnorisis is the point in the play. Anagnorisis is the point in the play. where ignorance is eradicated and truth comes in. Anagnorisis is a stage in a literary work when ignorance is eradicated and truth comes in. That is, ignorance gives way to truth. Ignorance gives way to truth. You can also put down a second definition of anagnorisis in this manner. You can say anagnorisis arises when a character discovers its shortcomings. When a character discovers his or her shortcomings. Anagnorisis arises in a play when a character discovers his or her shortcomings. Yes. In a literary work, there's always, especially in a tragedy, there's always what? A kind of weakness that will lead to the downfall of the tragic hero. The weakness can arise in two ways. It can take the form of hubris. It can take the form of hamartia, also known as tragic flow. And now, the difference between the two is that hubris is all about arrogance, the pride, the inherent pride. The pride, the arrogance that can be found in the act of a character that ultimately leads to his downfall. Let me give you an example of hubris. Don't worry, we are coming back to anagnorisis and peripetia, but you need to get these two first before you understand what anagnorisis and peripetia actually imply. Now, in essence, hubris is all about arrogance and pride. Take, for example, you have a character. Now, let me use an example in this manner. You have someone, probably a JAM aspirant as well, someone that's going to write JAM. This particular person went to meet an herbalist, for example. He wanted an herbalist to help him with a magical substance that will make him pass without reading. Do we have anything like that? Are we together, class? I said, somebody that is preparing for JAM went to meet a medicine man to give him a special medicine that will help him pass and remember things in the exam hall, even without reading. And he was asked to bring different things, like the tongue of an alligator, the intestine of a lion, the gallbladder of the goat, the kidney of a chimpanzee, all those kind of things. And you brought everything. And the sacrifice was done for you. With a special warning. That for the next 3 weeks, before you write this down, for the next 3 weeks, you must offer a living being per week to the God of the land. You must offer a human being per week to the gods of the land. He accepted it. And whenever he picked up his books to read, he was finding it very easy to understand. He began to feel on top of the world. He offered the sacrifice during the first week, the second week, then the third week was like, do I even need to offer any sacrifice? After all, I can understand what I'm reading now. I'm not offering any sacrifice. Now, arrogance is beginning to set in. What will happen? On the day of the example, he may likely go blank. He will probably start right-clicking instead of left-clicking. And without paying attention to it, he will keep on right-clicking till he answers all the 180 questions. Then he will click submit. And then that is all for that year. Now, that's a downfall. But what led to the downfall was arrogance. Failure towards, that's just an example anyway. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do. Yeah, it's just an example. So, failure to comply with the laid down rules of the herbalist has led towards his downfall. But what caused the downfall is what? Pride. And the fact that, yes, after all, I'm now self-sufficient. I'm now on top of the world. I don't have any problem again. I don't need anybody's help. I can help myself. I don't have any problem. That was the arrogance. And so arrogance can take any form. Hubris can take any form. So any sign of pride in the life of a character that eventually leads to the downfall of such character is called hubris. So you can say hubris is restricted. Hubris is restricted, but amateur is what? General. Amateur deals with a general weakness that is inherent in the life of a character. I mean, that is present. That's the meaning of the word inherent. That is present in the life of a character. That also leads to his downfall. Amateur can take the form of the following examples: drunkenness, loquaciousness, that is, you are talkative. And why talking too much, you eventually what? Divulge some secrets that eventually leads to downfall. So it's a weakness, it's a tragic flaw. Or you are a perpetual humanizer. You like women so much, and your love for women led to your downfall. You had HIV/AIDS at the end of the day. That HIV/AIDS is your what? Is your Waterloo. Is your downfall. But what led to your downfall is what? Too much love for women. Greed can also be an example of amateur. Greed, a character that is greedy. A character that is greedy. When greed is inherent in a character, it can lead to his downfall because that character in the play, they likely do what he or she is not supposed to do, just to get money. And in the process, probably he does the wrong thing and he dies. He dies. So what led to his death is what? Greed. And that greed is a form of tragic flaw. So if you check the dictionary meaning of flaw is what? Shortcoming or weakness. So any flaw, any shortcoming, any weakness that can be found in the life of a character that leads to the character's downfall is what we call amateur. But when the weakness is specifically related to pride, you call it hubris. So that is that about that. Now, let's take a look at what we were discussing earlier, anagnorisis versus peripetia. So, if you are asked in the exam that a particular stage in the play, when a character comes to full understanding of his errors that will likely lead to a downfall, that stage is called the stage of anagnorisis. It is called the stage of anagnorisis. So, the stage of anagnorisis, the stage where a character discovers that, wow, so this is why I'm suffering this fate. Now, take for example, you went to an herbalist. Sorry, we are using too much of the herbalist as an example. So you went to an herbalist, and upon getting there, what were you told? You were told to rub a particular powder on your head. And then once you rub the powder on your head, it becomes what we call isoye in Yoruba. Even what you did, the topics you didn't read in government, the topics you didn't read in CRS, the topics you didn't read in literature, everything will be displayed on a projector screen in front of you on the exam day. Or you were told, okay, you wanted to, okay, now I was watching a comedy yesterday. The woman wanted to make a person mad, and she went to a witch doctor. So as the witch doctor was giving her the instruction, she was not patient enough. The witch doctor said, you rub the powder on the face. She rubbed it on her face. And the doctor said, on the face of the person you want to make mad. And she already rubbed it on her own face. Now, at the point that she now discovers that, okay, I should have done it this way, this and that, at a time where it is irreversible. So the point of anagnorisis is always was irreversible. You can't do anything about the outcome again. But you will only have the opportunity of realizing that, okay, you will have the understanding. But for those that don't understand Yoruba, what I was saying is this. Your life has actually what come to what an everlasting low level, a low end, and it is irredeemable, irreversible. You are only given the opportunity to realize that this is why your life is ending in a tragic manner. So that point of discovery, that point of realization, that point when a character realizes the reason for his downfall is called what? The point of anagnorisis. On the other hand, if you are asked in the exam, that a point that marks a negative reversal or a sudden reversal of fortune for the main character, you call it what? Peripetia. Fantastic. So, in case you want to write, you can say peripetia is a point in the play. In case you are writing, you can say peripetia is a point in the play. Peripetia is a point in a play where a character undergoes a sudden reversal of fortune, a sudden reversal of fortune, a sudden reversal of fortune. Full stop. Or you can say it is a point that marks the beginning of the downfall of the tragic hero. So you can say peripetia is also the point that marks the beginning of the downfall of the tragic hero. That is when the tragic hero begins to what? Experience signs of downfall. That is the point of peripetia. Who can give us an example or the instance of peripetia in Konosakabo's play? Let them die alone. Yes, who can give us an example? Yes, anything for us? Well, a good point of peripetia in that book was when Geneva was killed. When Geneva was captured and killed by Lamboy and Musa. So it marked the beginning of the downfall of the queen. Because at that point, the rumors began to spread that she was responsible for the death of baby Geneva. And it began to spread. And trust people, evil rumors tend to spread faster than good rumors. She must have been doing good things for them in the society or in the community prior to that period. But the moment they heard something negative about her, they willingly accepted it without doubting anything, without questioning her, without trying to make necessary inquiries. So that point was the point of peripetia in that book. So if you are asked in the exam that the beginning of the downfall of a tragic hero is called that, the answer is peripetia. A sudden reversal of the fortune of the main character or of the tragic hero in a play is called, the answer is what? Peripetia. So the question rather, can be asked in diverse ways. And you need to be on the alert in order not to be caught off guard. They can ask you the same question in 5 different ways, and you need to know what to do at that point. Yeah, so one thing about the examiners, one thing about the examiners is that what? They don't have new questions. They don't have new questions. All they do is what? Recycle existing questions. However, they are not dumb. They are not senseless. They are not stupid. They will try to what? Patch up the questions. They will try to change the wordings of the question. They will try to make the questions look relatively new so that you will be able to what? Make mistakes. But when you know what you're doing, when you are able to actually gather your thoughts and you realize that, okay, this thing is still saying the same thing that I know, then you will have no problem at all. So that is that about that. Now, I want us to talk about purgation or catharsis. I want us to talk about catharsis. Yeah, I want us to talk about purgation or catharsis. Let me answer this question. In a literary work, catharsis typically takes place dash A at the commencement of a play, B in the middle of a play, C towards the after watching a play, D in the course of a play. What's the best answer? Wow, that's interesting. I have two answers. Some people say after watching a play. Some say in the course of a play. Okay, what is catharsis? Yes, the cleansing of emotions. Let's define it, then we're able to analyze that question again, whether it is after watching a play or in the course of a play. So catharsis basically talks about the cleansing or the relieving, to relieve, relieving, the cleansing or the relieving of the emotions of fear and pity, the cleansing or relieving of the emotions of fear and pity that must have taken place or that must have accumulated in the act or in the process rather of watching a tragic work. Let me take it again so that you can have a better understanding. So catharsis is the relieving or the cleansing of the emotions of fear and pity that must have arisen or accumulated in the heart of the audience, while watching a play. Now, catharsis typically takes place. over again. And a director continues to go in that manner until perfection is attained, until you become perfect in acting out that particular role. So a director serves the purpose of ensuring proper interpretation of characters' roles. That is the duty of a director. How about a costumier? Of course, a play is about imitation. A play is about mimicry. You are trying to mimic a particular character. And to mimic that character, you have to be dressed in the normal regalia. You want to act as a soldier. Can you see a soldier on the battlefield holding a gun, putting on agbada? It's not possible. You want to act the role of a lawyer, and you have a case in court, and you are putting on turtleneck and jeans trouser in court. That is not the proper costume. So a costumier is a member of the crew. A costumier is a member of the crew that ensures the provision of all necessary acting equipment. So a costumier is a person, is a member of any other equipment. For some roles, you might need makeup. In the church. I don't know how true that is. Yes. So, and who knows? It may be a sign to you that you're ugly when you're always being asked to act the role of the devil. Because after all, the white men have already given us the impression that the devil is black, while Jesus Christ is white. Where they got the impression from, I don't know. But that is what they actually baptized us with. They baptized us with that erroneous impression that anything demonic is black or African in nature, while anything holy, anything pure, anything righteous has to be white, either European or Asian or American or whatever it is. Okay, so that's just by the way. So, in essence, a costumier is someone that makes available all the necessary acting accessories to ensure that a play is actually well staged. The next thing we need to discuss under this head, dramatic I slid my hands into his pockets and brought out a check of 500,000 naira. And I inserted it in my pocket. And the audience, the audience, could vividly see everything that transpired. But the owner of the check did not see it. What is the meaning of that? That is dramatic irony. So if you are asked in the exam, there's a situation in which the audience knows what a fellow character on stage does not know. The answer is what? Dramatic irony. If you are asked that a situation in a play in which an event is obvious to the audience but oblivious to that particular event. Can we have one class? Can we have one class, please? So now, dramatic irony can be seen in John Osborne's book. Let me give you an example of dramatic irony. A popular example of dramatic irony from John Osborne's Look Back in Anger. How many of us have read that book? Of course, every hand you go. Yes. So whether you are saying the truth or not, I know. Well, please, that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. Yes. So in this particular book, something transpired between Jimmy Potter and Alison Potter. Don't forget that in that book, Jimmy Potter was always complaining about about Alison Potter's societal status from the upper middle class. Why Jimmy himself was from the lower class. Now, in that book, don't forget that in At Once a One, after the scuffle between Jimmy and Alison, or between Jimmy and Cliff Lewis, that later led to them injuring Alison Potter's aunt. Don't forget wow. Did you inform your husband? He said no. She said no. Already knew that the woman was pregnant. But a fellow character like Jimmy Potter does not know. So when a character, when the audience or a reader knows something that a fellow character does not know, dramatic irony is said to have taken place. Secondly, verbal irony. If anyone is living beside you, tap the person. Please. It's very dangerous to be sleeping now. May we not sleep the sleep of death and failure. Please, it's very dangerous to be sleeping now. Any sleep that is taking place now is tantamount to the sleep of failure and the sleep of death. We have barely 5 days to go. So if you are sleeping now, I can only conclude that probably your fellow people are following you here. Yes, they've been able to locate this place with the use of a Wi-Fi, and they were able to locate you, and now they are compelling you to sleep. So it's better you tell them, leave me alone. I must call 300 a jam. It's better you remove them now. That's a fact, too. Whether you believe it or not. If you are sleeping now, I will just conclude that your hometown people, your village powers,
have accompanied you to this place. Of course, and these are, they don't need address before they locate you. They don't need any special address to locate you. You don't need to write address to them. You don't need to send address to them on WhatsApp. They will locate this place. They are faster and more accurate than Google Map. Yes. Please, can we stop this noise? Now let's move on. What is verbal irony? Very simple. Verbal irony simply describes an instance in which a character on stage says the exact opposite of what he or she intends to say. Of course, just interpret it like a normal irony that you know.
On stage says the exact opposite of what he or she intends to say. In addition, what is situational irony? Just as the name suggests, situation plus irony. Is this what? When an event, when an occurrence contradicts normal expectations. When an event contradicts normal expectations. For example, for every action you take, there is an expectation that you have. Yes or no? Yes. When you slap your friend for no justifiable reason, what do you expect? You expect what? Terrible slap in return. Are you expecting the person to fulfill what God said in the book of Matthew? That it's on the other cheek to him. Eh? So when someone slaps you on the left hand side, just from the right hand side to him. If possible, present your face to the person. And then, so, but you slap the person, and the person kisses you immediately. Let's take a look at that same book. That's a look back in anger again. When Cliff Lewis and Alice Potter were there in the room, they were playing some kind of unholy games, some dirty games. So he got to a point, Cliff Lewis kissed Alice Potter, and immediately Jimmy Potter opened the door. In a typical Nigerian setting, what do you expect at that point? Oshiri, Owowiri, Iwofeyawo. What is the matter? And from there, exchange your blows and punches. But Jimmy entered and he didn't do anything, he didn't react. Again, in about I think the third or the fourth scene, there was a kind of argument between Elena and Jimmy Potter. Elena slapped Jimmy Potter and immediately kissed him again. Contrary to what you are expecting, after Elena slapped Jimmy Potter, you will expect Jimmy Potter to react and act like a man and probably give her the beating of her life. But she slapped him and kissed him again. You prepared rice, you left the rice in the kitchen to pray. And after praying, you wanted to serve the rice. Then you saw this and yam in the pot. The opposite of what you intend, the opposite of what you expect in the literary work is now happening. You are watching a movie, and it is common knowledge in that movie that anyone that goes into the evil forest will die there. But then, one pastor wanted to go to the evil forest. So he got there, he conducted his revival, and he came back alive. What is that? Situational irony. Because you were expecting the man to what? Fall down and die. According to MFM prayer points, to fall down and die. But instead, it was the demons that fell down and died. Contrary to your expectations, you were not expecting the man to come out alive, but indeed, he came out alive. That is situational irony. Are we together? So that is that about that. This will now lead us to a discussion on soliloquy. Yes, thank you. Aside soliloquy and monologue. These terms are always being misused by different candidates. There's a need to draw a line of distinction between an aside, a soliloquy, and a monologue. Who wants to try? Who wants to try? Yes, anyone? Okay, since no one is willing to try, let's try it. So you can say an aside is a speech. An aside is a speech. An aside is a speech made by a character on stage. An aside is a speech made by a character on stage. Made by a character on stage to the hearing of the audience. To the hearing of the audience. Hearing of the audience. But not to the hearing of fellow characters on stage. But not to the hearing of other characters on stage. Not to the hearing of other characters on stage. So that is that. Now you're on the stage. You made a statement. You made a remark. And only the audience can hear what you have said. But the fellow character on stage has no idea of what you have said. Then automatically, it means what you have done is what? An aside. I'm on the stage. I'm on the stage. Engaging in a discussion or a conversation with somebody. And then all of a sudden, I now say something else, which only the audience could hear. I was telling that person that, my God, don't worry, we're going to rob the bank. We're going to rob the bank and we'll make lots of money. And after making money, I will just get a new car, I will get a new this, I will get a new that. We will share the money 50-50. And I said, yes, now so. And then as he turned away from me, and I said, they play my fans. Lọ́wọ́ sí máa gbà tí máa dá nìkan ló máa wọ́ òwe máa bá ẹ̀dá sínú ẹwà pé I was addressing the words audience, but he didn't know my sinister motive for it. He didn't know that I had a sinister agenda against him. So in his mind, he thinks that we are friends, not knowing that my own plans for him are that of what evil and not of good. And that's the way of what God has for us. So my own plans for him is that of evil and not of good. So for the fact that I've made the audience aware through my statements, so that statement I've made is what an aside. Is an aside. How about monologue? Monologue means what? Monologue means what? One. So what is monologue? Is what an independent speech, a long speech made by only one character to no one in particular. Is a long speech. Is a speech made by a single character on stage to no one in particular. When you are discussing with someone on the stage, expecting to get answers, that was dialogue. But now you are conversing alone. Whether someone is there with you or not, but so far you are talking alone with no intention of getting any answer, then that is what monologue. Now, take for example, a character comes to the stage and he surveys the whole room. Ó mà lè yẹ kí n pàṣẹ ìjáàbù yìí báyìí. Ọlọ́run mà ní já ṣẹ̀ sí i. Àbúrò méjì ló máa fẹ́ kọjá àbúrò báyìí. Kò mà ní dá kọ́ lọ pàṣẹ kéèmí má pàṣẹ. Àbọ̀ náà wọ́n máa gbà mí kẹ́. Ní ìdẹ̀ tí kàwé o. Gbogbo bí mástà ṣe sọ̀rọ̀ pẹ̀lípẹ́tíà, tó ń sọ̀rọ̀ pẹ̀lípápà, tó ń sọ̀rọ̀ pẹ̀lípọ́ńpù ní kíláàsì. Gbogbo ẹ̀kọ́ ọdún bí kan bí lè sí mi ní àti ẹ̀yẹ́ mi. Olúwa kí ni màá ṣe báyìí o? Ṣé mi lọ bá bàbá ìsọ̀yè báyìí kó sọ orí mi? torí kò tẹ̀ yé mi tí bá gbé gọ́ọ̀mẹ̀ntì náà máa wo non-alignment máa wo foreign policy mo wo gbogbo ẹ̀ èwo ló ń jẹ́ non-alignment èwo ló ń jẹ́ alignment kò tẹ̀ yé mi báyìí kí ni kí n wá ṣe. Now the person is talking alone, not addressing anybody. That's an example of what monologue, a speech made by a single individual on stage is called a monologue. Now, how do we differentiate aside and monologue from soliloquy? Yes, who can give us the meaning of soliloquy? Yes. Yes, exactly. So soliloquy arises when the inner thoughts of a character is being portrayed. When a character
one another's thoughts, except you are a witch. You can't hear one another's thoughts. But for the fact that we are watching a movie, for example, the thoughts, the inner thoughts of a character is always what reflected or presented to the audience through sound effects. And we are able to what get carried along. They can easily carry us along. So when a character thinks aloud in the course of a play, then that's what we call soliloquy. Do we understand that? Yes. So far so good. Any question on drama? So far so good. Any question on drama? Well, most times the character is always alone. But while expressing his thoughts aloud, the audience can hear. Yes, the audience can hear. Yes. Yes. Any question on drama so far? Yes. What did you say? Are you shy? Battles. Oh, yeah. Thank you. That's a very significant point that we need to discuss. Now, what is pathos? Pathos is the act of deriving or eliciting pity from the what? From the audience. Let me say it in a primary school manner. It is the art of making the audience demonstrate pity for you. The art of making the audience to pity you. So anything, any mechanism in a play that helps towards derive pity. No, báyìí lè ṣe mí o. Ṣé kò ní kú báyìí, ṣé ò ní pa báyìí? So that technique is what we call pathos. Take note, guys, that there's a difference between pathos and bathos. There's a difference between pathos on one hand and bathos on the other hand. So the one with letter B, battles, is a figure of speech, and we'll talk about that probably in our second period, maybe on Monday or tomorrow, I don't know, but we'll talk about it. So wherever we stop today, we'll continue from there in the next class. But the fact is that if the only thing we can achieve in the course of this marathon session, if the only things we are able to achieve in the course of this 4-day marathon is figures of speech, elements of drama, elements of prose, elements of poetry, we have fought a good fight of academic feat. Yes, because once you know these things, rest assured that your JAMB, your UTME is 80% secured. Though in the course of the teaching, probably the next time, I will expose us to, I will kind of remind us of certain techniques on answering questions on unseen literature. I know many of us must have been taught unseen literature, but we will emphasize this again in the course of this 4-day marathon so that we actually go into the all fully confident and prepared to battle this exam. Yes. Sometimes many of us have this fear and trepidation for unseen poetry and unseen prose. But I'll show you it's not a problem. It is very easy. And the truth of the matter is, The only things that you need to tackle questions on unseen prose and unseen poetry is 100% knowledge of literary devices. Once you understand literary devices, unseen literature is not anything special. You will be able to tackle it effectively. Because most questions on unseen prose and unseen poetry always boil down to literary devices and poetic devices. The likes of tone, like I said the other time, mood, imagery. You need to know the various forms of imagery for you to do well in unseen poetry. You know the various forms of imagery, know which one is visual, know which one is olfactory, know which one is kinesthetic, know which one is gustatory, know which one is auditory, know which one is tactile, know which one is organic, though organic is less popular. Yes, thermal, know which one is thermal. Yes, we have the popular ones and we have the relatively unpopular ones. So when it's time to deal with poetry, I will let you know all these things. Any questions so far? I want to launch us into the world of prose very quickly. We might not be able to finish because of time constraints, but we will do something. Yes, on drama, any question? Yes. Are you raising your hand? No. How are we good to go? Is there anything we are missing? Oh, let me just tell us about prologue and epilogue as well. Yes, prologue and epilogue. What's the difference between prologue and epilogue? Prologue takes place at the beginning of the play. It helps to give a kind of introductory insight about events to watch out for in a play. While epilogue is at the end, and epilogue helps us to shed more light on events that are not contained in the main work. Sometimes when you are watching a movie, especially all these your Yoruba Nollywood movies, they will show you a scene and then thereafter they just say, to God be the glory. After to God be the glory, they will now show you something that Ademola later got married to Esther. Ibidu later relocated to Lagos where she ran mad for life. And this and that, this and that. All those ones are not contained in the literature in the main work, but more light will be shed on it so that you not go, so that you not begin to wonder that how will the play end like this? So they will give you session to a close. Yes, we bring the session to a close. So prose is another genre of literature. Now, very quickly, art is to drama as dash is to prose. Art is to drama as dash is to prose. Chapter. The longest division of a play is what? Is art. The longest structural division of a poem is what? Canto. Canto. A poem has three divisions. We have the canto, followed by the stanza, then the lines. So cantos are used in narrative poems like what? Epic. How many of us know epic? So cantos are used in epic, and sometimes they can be used in epilions as well. Don't forget that an epilion is a shorter form of an epic. An epilion is also a narrative poem, but it is a shorter form of an epic. So that is that. So very quickly, under prose, I will quickly tell us some things. So difference between fictions and non-fictions, that's the elementary aspect of prose. So of course, a fictional work is a work that originates from the words, the imaginations of the writer. Yes or no? Yes. A fictional work is a work that originates from the words, imaginations of the writer. It's an imaginary work. It's not a real life occurrence. It is not a real life occurrence. On the other hand, a non-fiction is a real life story. A story that has transpired in real life, now being presented to the public for them to learn one or two things about it. Then when you have a combination of real life events and imaginary events, you call it what? Faction. Faction. A combination of fiction plus non-fiction is called faction. A fiction about a fiction is called what? A fiction about a fiction. That is a fiction that teaches you the intricacies of writing a fictional work. A fiction talking about another fiction is called what? Meta fiction. Meta, the way you spell your meta AI. Meta fiction. Yes, a fictional work that is written about a fiction is called a meta fiction. Can we get it down? Yes. So now I will really tell us the meaning of these words. Memoir, Bildungsroman, Roman Aclef, Picaresque. Yes, we will stop at that. Yes. So we will continue from there in the next session. So memoir. So we talked about fiction, non-fiction. Then we talked about faction and meta fiction. So now let's quickly talk about memoir. Roman Harkless, Bildungsroman, and Picaresque. Yeah, don't worry. We group everything under the next session. So the epistolary is written in form of a letter, but we'll talk about that later. So now, a memoir. What is a memoir? You can put it down. That a memoir is a specified. Okay, sorry, use what specific. Don't use specified. A memoir is a specific account. A memoir is a specific account. A memoir is a specific account of the experiences of a participant. Of the experiences of a participant or a partaker in a major event. That is, when somebody takes part in a major event and he decides to put down all his or her experiences, then automatically what the person has written is called a memoir. Now take for example, somebody decides, okay, somebody participated in the Aba Women's Riot of 1929. The person knew the genesis of everything. How the warrant chiefs were talking about taxation, talking about how to tax women and everything like that. And then the battle, the everything took place. And then one woman now decided to document everything. Now she's going to document it from her own perspective, from her own standpoint. That is everything she experienced on her own. So that kind of book is called what? A memoir. That kind of book is called a memoir. As simple as that. On the other hand, we have Roman Aclef. Sometimes you are reading a book and the book is about a real life event, but the names in that book don't sound familiar. What does that simply mean? It means what? Fictional characters have been adopted to tell a real life story. E.g., Second Class Citizen by Emecheta Buchi. Yes. Second Class Citizen is a typical example of a Roman Aclef. In the exam, if you see a question on Roman Aclef and there's no Roman Aclef in the options, what will you pick? Historical prose or historical novel. So once you see a question whose answer is supposed to be Roman Aclef and you can't find Roman Aclef, automatically the answer is what? Historical prose. As simple as that. So historical prose is a real life account. A real life account with imaginary or fictional characters. Are we together? Yes. So fictional characters but real life events. Everything that happened in Second Class Citizen happened to Buchi Emecheta, but she did not use the name Buchi for herself. She used the name Ada. She adopted the name Ada for herself. That's a perfect example of historical prose. Then, thirdly, this is the second to the last thing we'll be discussing before we bring this session to an end. So, Bildungsroman. What's the Bildungsroman? It is a prose. If you're writing, you can put it down this way. It is a prose or a novel written about the developmental stages or the growth stages of a main character from childhood towards adulthood. A Bildungsroman can only be found in a non-fiction, yes or no? Hey. A Bildungsroman can only be found in a fiction, yes or no? A Bildungsroman can arise either in a fiction or a non-fiction, yes or no? Yes. So a Bildungsroman is not necessarily a non-fiction. It can also take place in a fiction. So far it talks about the stages of growth and development of the main character from childhood to adulthood. Yet again, second class citizen is a good example. Why? Because the book was able to portray the stages of growth of Ada from when Ada was a child to when she became a full adult. A Bildungsroman has its origin in which country? Germany, yes. It's of German origin. Yes. Now, conclusively for this session, what is a picaresque? You can write while I explain. So a picaresque is a novel. A picaresque is a novel written about the adventures of a mischievous person. Yes, a picaresque is a novel written about the experiences or the adventures of a mischievous person. If you don't want to use mischievous person, you can use scoundrel. Scoundrel. This is the spelling of scoundrel. Yes, let me recap. So, a picaresque is a novel written about the adventures and the experiences of a scoundrel, a mischievous person, or a rogue. The one you call rogue is not rogue. Yes. Somebody was reading this definition for us somewhere, and the person said rogue. So the one is not rogue, is a rogue. So yeah, it's not a person that is fond of what? Committing different atrocities, mischiefs, perpetrating troubles, tormenting troubles, and many other things. So when you write about the adventures of a rogue, a tout, a thug, a mischievous person, that book is called a picaresque. So that is that about that. Before we bring everything to a close, 10 quick questions. 10 quick random questions for us to answer. Once you know the answer, you raise your hand, you answer brilliantly and intelligently without wasting time. Question number 1. Maybe I should pick candidates. Yes, I'll pick candidates. Time of your life so that you'll be able to disgrace yourself very well. Yes. So that you disgrace yourself. Yes. Once I point at you, don't signal to me that I don't know it. Once I call you, just tell me whatever you know. If all you know is Allahu Akbar, just say Allahu Akbar. Or if all you want to say is praise the Lord, just say praise the Lord. Yes. Question number 1. A figure of speech. A figure of speech in which sensations and emotions are exchanged. A figure of speech that exchanges the sensations and emotions of a concept for another concept is called dash. A. Metonymy. B. Paradox. C. Transferred epithet. D. Synesthesia. Yes? You. Why are you looking so shocked? Okay, she says synesthesia, and that is correct. Yes, the answer is synesthesia. Yes. The next question. Okay, we'll make it 5, not 10 because of our time. The next question. In poetry, what do you call the harmony and the pleasantness of sounds brought about by rhythm and meter? brought about by reading, meter, rhymes, and everything. In essence, what do you call the pleasantness of sounds? A. Cacophony. B. Euphony. C. Epiphony. D. Durophony. You call it euphony, correct? Euphony is the answer. Now, in the course of today's teaching, if you have any question, please ensure you write down the questions and you ask in the next class. Or alternatively, you can drop the comments on the YouTube channel so that we can attend to the questions. Yes. So now, the third question. The third question. A stage that succeeds the peak stage in the development of a plot. I want someone from this room. A stage that succeeds the peak stage in the development of a plot is called dash. Option A, climax. Option B, rising action. Option C, falling action. Option D, denouement. The question says a stage that succeeds the peak stage. You need to interpret the question. What is the meaning of the peak stage? The peak stage is what? The stage that has the highest level of tension or excitement, and that is the climax stage. So which stage succeeds the climax stage? It is the falling action stage or the anti-climax stage. Take note that there is a difference between climax as a figure of speech and climax as a stage in plot development. There is a difference in anticlimax as a figure of speech and anticlimax as a stage in plot development. Please do not mix them up. So that is that. So time is no longer on our side, and I think it's better for us to stop at this juncture. So any question should be directed either to me in the next class or through the YouTube channel or through any other channel of your choice. Thank you very much for your time. See you in the next session. Yeah.